What's up, everybody? Welcome back. So, basically the only thing that you missed was that I went up to the Amaro launch, talked with the Amaja that was there, and took one of these guys, flew them out, because there really isn't a footpath way to Kolusia. You would have to fly with an Amaro in order to reach here. And if you needed to, you could talk to the guard here. You can just ride the Amaro back to the Crystarium, nothing major there. But this is Kolusia. It kind of gives Limsa vibes. Off in the distance, right off when you get here, you can see Yulmore in all of its gaudy glory, just kind of chilling there. And we got some red caps here. They call them hobgoblins, but really they're just glorified red caps. Right down to the fact they're literally wearing red caps. And get the mount ready. We're going to be flying on a nice little void scent today. Got some goobos chilling out on the beach. And then right up here from where you land, you have the small village of Stilltide, which has like the first aetheryte that you're able to run into. It's the easiest one to get to because it's literally the second you land here. Just go up the hill and then you're able to teleport. So that way you don't have to run to the Crystarium and bug the Amaro launcher. And there's two different pathways that you could go. If you head up north, you end up near the lower part of the cliffside here, which really doesn't have too much. You do have to come up here for like missions for this main storyline and things like that. You'll mostly just find abandoned houses and the like here. There is still good bridges, so it's not like they're all going to be like rickety wooden ones. They're made out of stone, so they're good quality. But other than that, it's mostly just going to be wolves up here, abandoned houses. And there really isn't a way up the cliff in the first part of the mission. You also get some iguanas here like you did in Lakeland, the further away from the wolves that you get. But if you follow the main road, there is a road down. If you follow the lower one, I'll loop back around to that one. That will take you to this village, this settlement here, which is the village of Right, which is one of the other two aetherytes out of the three that you can get. And this is the other one that's the easiest. For obvious reasons, because you could literally just run across the landscape and just run up to it and attune to it. There is an aetheryte in Yulmore itself. However, that one doesn't become unlocked until further into the story mission. And there is an aetheryte up on the top of the cliff, so you don't have to ride this giant honkin' cockamamie contraption. But that's also not until after, at the very least, you get Yulmore's aetheryte. So it is a little bit of a wait to get up there, but it is really pretty. And just past Right, over in this area, is an abandoned shipyard. So kind of think Morabay Dry Docks, Ale Port type deal, where they don't really have ships anymore because of the events of the flood and everything like that. Plus, with the events of Yulmore itself, people don't really work on the ships, but we do still have some that like working, like this guy over here. And they are, to my knowledge, they are citizens of Right themselves. So they essentially travel down there to work on the boats, basically live in old times. And mobs around here are mostly going to be kind of like the Ents from Lakeland, except they don't have the leaves on them. Then there's also going to be Hysops, which are basically just flying poison ivy that always hate me, I'm convinced. If you head up towards the north, there are dodos up here. They're called rails instead of dodos, just because they need different names for them. And over in this area, there is a broken down Talos, which is essentially just a giant stone and magic infused golem. That was kind of used for a majority of like the heavy lifting throughout this region. You'll see Talos scattered around everywhere from here to Amarang. You might see some in Rentica. You won't really see any in Ilmeg, just because at that point the Fae have kind of taken over everything, and they don't really need a giant stone golem to carry their stuff. Okay. Head back along this pathway real quick, make our way back to right, and then I can show you that other pathway that we didn't take the first time. Since we're not kind of like walking along or flying alongside the cliff, you can actually see how the road is set up. It does split here, and that will lead you back to Stilltide, over that way if you just cross the bridge. And then if you head down, you'll be taking this little hill up, and I still don't know what kind of creature to call the Germalants, but this is one of the mobs that you'll see along in this little area of the road, along with some, well, buzzards, essentially. Still don't know what to call that thing. Anyways. Get back, Airborne. And this leads you directly to Gate Town, which is essentially just the shack capital of the world that lives outside of Yulmore. It is where all those who aren't really rich or influential kind of live out their days being given handouts from the city, hoping that one day they can join and live with the rich and wealthy in paradise, quote unquote. And then if they do get chosen, they're able to go through the doors, and then they end up in Yulmore. And I'm only going to show this part of Yulmore just because it is an extension of Gate Town itself. Because these were like the first hovels that were built before the actual Gate Town outside of the main gate. And so that is all that you'll really be able to see in terms of the first half of the storyline. You do come back later on, and when you do, that's when you're going to be able to unlock the ability to grab the Aetheryte in Yulmore, as well as be able to activate the giant honking elevator that you can see built into the cliffside right there, that we are flying straight to. And that will give you access to the upper levels of Kolusia. It's also important to know that the ether currents and the Ethernet missions, like to increase your movement speed and be able to fly, those are split between the two levels. So you won't just be able to steamroll, use your ether compass, and just grab all the currents and get all the missions and just fly up there ahead of time. They set it up so that you physically are not able to do that unless you have a friend with a multi-person mount that can fly you up there. But this is the bottom rung. It is the bottom of the elevator, and as you can see, we have some Talos here that are essentially the mechanics for running the elevator. When they get it ready to move, the Talos just start cranking those gears, and then we start moving. And I know we could just fly up there, but I'm just gonna use this guy right up to top rung. And then this is the top of it. You can see it's a bit more abandoned looking, just because the bottom one has recently been worked on with getting the Talos operational again. Whereas up here, it's still kind of a no man's land. Like, we have some disassembled and broken apart Talos. We have random pieces of gear that are just kind of scattered around. But you can see that they're starting to bring up supplies for the village that lives, like the settlement for up here. But it's still not as like clean and kept together, just because people up here didn't really care much about the ladder working. It does still have a couple nice houses though, which do look nice. And for up here, you do have essentially defective and rogue Talos that roam around, and they will attack you, so you want to make sure not to just run up to them and ask them to carry your stuff. But you follow the main pathway here, ignoring the Talos that try to punch you, and the bombs that try to blow up on you, and you'll end up in the small settlement of Amity, which is made up essentially of people who used to live in Yulmore and got kicked out for various reasons that I won't go into to disrupt storyline. this place doesn't have an aetheryte just because of how small it is, because it's mostly just like a Hail Mary, hey, we're gonna try to stay alive here type deal. Which is something I am upset about because of how often you go there in the later half of the storyline. But if you follow down this road, you can see that it's more well built out. It's not just like just stomped into the ground like this road here. It's actual like cobblestone. This area I'm showing you first because it also doesn't have an aetheryte like Amity does. It's not as important to the main storyline, but if you do follow the Alliance raid after the first half of Shadowbringers, you do end up here quite frequently. We got a nice little metal bridge, and we have machinas. Frog-shaped machina that will attack you in this area for mobs. And this is the Dwarven settlement of Kumra. Dwarves are essentially just the Lalafels of the first, and they have a very rich and very proud of themselves history. They also kind of have the general notion of like Romeo and Juliet's family, where it's the two big families feuding. And this is the settlement that you work with the twins for part of the Alliance raids, where you go into the mountains that were where they found ruins, this whole thing. And there's also going to be a party going on, but that's a whole different thing. But I do love the design here just because of how they integrated the metal into the mountainside. So we got this village of Tomra. This little area they don't really talk about. It's mostly just like a place where they would put their sick and dying during a disease called Stoneblight. The other Dwarven village has one like that. And we go into that one for one of the side quests as well. But north of Tomra, if you can see that little pathway kind of trailing into the bridge, we end up having the mines system here. Which really, this one we deal more with than the actual Dweger Mountains. And we mostly just have some kobolds as the main mob that spawns in the hallway. It's nothing too end of the world. Then you go into this one, it's really just meant to confuse you. Then you go into the longer one here, and think of this as Sulphur Canyon. If you couldn't tell from the Sulphur Bergen here. It's essentially just the giant, like the biggest mining area that the dwarf families go to. But because of location, for obvious reasons, there ends up being feuding rights over who can go there, which leads to other fights. But this is the mine shaft here. You do end up having to come here for part of the MSQ. It's like a major part here. There is an instant and everything. Just try to fly our way out of the tunnels before the horse blows up the entire mountain with the sulfur. And instead of just going our own separate, like, willy-nilly, we're gonna follow this pathway, because this will lead us to the other Dwarven settlement. And there's various types of different monsters along the way. Like, we have the Hysops again from down below. We have the I can never say this name right. The Gulgnu, which essentially just are giant, like, angry bison. We have a couple of island rails over in that corner there, but they're not really as mandatory. And up here, it's nothing really fancy. It's just some more abandoned buildings. Get back onto the roads. And back down there, we have Amity. And right there is Mount Gulg. A lot of stuff happened. It normally doesn't float in the air like that. There is a pathway to get up to the entrance to that, which is literally just following this road here, really. And then following this pathway here. But that mostly just leads you to the dungeon entrance itself, so we're just going to ignore that. and follow the main path up here to the other dwarven settlement of Tomra. And Tomra actually has an Ethernet crystal because this is for the MSQ where we do most of our work with dwarves. And this is the home of the Thole family, and they are very, very proud of themselves. If you're working on the healer side quest, Giat will end up in Tomra because this is where he's actually from. He is a loyal Tomran. Like a loyal member of Thole, through and through. So we have it's kind of a bigger settlement than the other one is, which also justifies the Ethernet. And then they have their own little, dig into the mountains for their dead and dying. And, there is one other area. In all honesty, I didn't think about it until just now, because I personally have just literally unlocked the area, maybe an hour, 2 hours ago. So we're just gonna fly back towards Top Rung. I'm not even gonna, take the time to ride down the ladder. I'm just gonna fly off the cliff. Nothing will happen. I'm on a magical fire horse. It'll be fine. Ladder operator there. Hi, Tom. And if you can see this little area here, that indicates whether or not you are able to go into the underwater region of the Tempest, which is literally the name of the entire water system here in Kolusia. All of this is the Tempest. And for part of the storyline, you actually go under the sea, which is where most of my Little Mermaid jokes come from. And when you're flying up here, you do have a really good view of the lower part of Kolusia from the upper part of the cliff. Let me fly over there real quick, just so that way you can see what I mean. Because just floating in the middle there, for obvious reasons, you're going to get a good view of it. But if you are still going through the MSQ, you haven't climbed the mountain yet, and you want to get a good overlay of how things look, there's this nice little cliff edge here, which actually is also part of the MSQ too, so you would have to come here regardless. Jump off the horse so I don't start flying away. And you can get a really good view of the entire lower region of Kolusia from here. You can see the shipyard. For obvious reasons, you can see Gate Town and Yulemore. You can see the town of Wright down there with its Ethernet. You can see Still Tide over there in that area, as well as the connecting roads and seeing how they work. And it helps lay things out. They even also have a couple of the windmills like you would see in Limsa. You can see Bottom Rung. It's a pretty good layout for being able to look at everything. It's a good location for that. Plus, if you look behind you, you can see the giant floating mountain. But, you know what? We're just going to have that be our backdrop for this, because that is everything for this tour of Kolusia. Up next, we're going to be heading into Yulemore itself, besides just standing in the outside region like I showed you earlier. And yeah, we'll be seeing you soon there. If not, then hopefully you end up having a good rest of your day, and I'll see you around later.